Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Curve Lunch and Learn with Li Karlsén. I'm just going to wait a minute while people file in. But while we're waiting, I thought I would introduce Li and sort of tell you why I invited Li to come onto this Lunch and Learn. As you know, the Curve is completely dedicated to modernizing and bringing the best of leadership learning and how to build strong corporate culture to the profession of policing. And one of the things that we're committed to doing is learning from people outside of the profession. As you know, many of you who attend other policing conferences, most of it is very insular and comes from the inside. And we've been trying to do things to find skills and mindset and all kinds of things that will benefit police, but come from outside the policing world. And Li is one of the best people I could think of to come and help us. Let me give you a little background about who Li is, and then we'll jump right in. Li is the world record holder for freediving, for diving under sea ice. She also holds multiple Scandinavian and European records for freediving and holding her breath and things like that, and understands how to manage stress better than anyone I know. As I've learned from Li, that diving under the sea ice is so dangerous that Guinness won't officially recognize her record because they don't want anybody else to try it. The other thing I've learned from Li is that free diving, and she can dive down to 80 meters, by the way, free diving is less about holding your breath, and that's what everybody thinks, and it's more about managing stress. Learning your breath is a skill. You can work really hard in it. You'll get better at it. You may not be able to dive to 80 meters, but you can dive a lot deeper and hold your breath for longer than you probably think you can if you learn the techniques and you practice like any skill. But it's a mental game that if you're at depth and you lose focus, you die. If you're at depth and you get distracted, you die. If you're at depth and you panic, you die. And it is deeply, deeply meditative. It is all about managing stress. And I thought, my goodness, we need to teach police this technique. Li, thank you so much for coming on board and helping us out. It's so good to see you.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for the introduction.
You've had quite a storied career. I know you were in the Army. I know that you were deployed to Afghanistan. You were a combat veteran. I also know that you have had you suffered trauma as a young person. Can you please share with us, how you came to find freediving and how it's helped you manage your own stress in your own life?
Yeah, the small question.
Let's start easy.
I started freediving because I was terrified of dark, deep water, and I think that's a human thing to be. But since I grew up in a coastal town, it felt really weird and awkward to be afraid of, the water. So I felt that I had to face this fear. So that was basically my purpose. And at that time, I was in the Army. I served for almost 20 years. So I was working at the headquarters. This was a lot of stress, and I'd done a few missions in Afghanistan and also in Africa. And I didn't know it then, but I had accumulated so much stress. So when I started freediving, it was basically the ventilation that I needed to not hold my breath, but to find my breath again. So freediving as a sport, as you said, it's very mental, and it's a lot about stress management. So it's basically allowing yourself to de-stress before you fill up with stress that freediving as a sport is.
Explain that to me. It wasn't about holding your breath, but finding your breath. What does that mean?
It means that in order to do something stressful, you kind of have to take away the stress that you have in your container, like your cup of coffee. Like if you're overcharged with stress from your childhood or trauma, or breaking up with your girlfriend or work, and it's up here, and then you're set out to do something that's even more stressful, you will get overflooded by stress, and that will cause anxiety and panic attacks and burnout. So basically what I learned is that breathing, it takes away the stress. It helps you deload, empty your stress container, so then you can fill up with something stressful that's more manageable, such as a sport
Or being a cop.
Or being a cop, exactly, or being in any kind of uniform, for sure.
Right,
For
right.
sure.
And I'm very curious, sort of, because it was a theory. First, you set out to sort of face a fear, right? You live in a coastal town. You're like, this is ridiculous that I'm afraid of dark, deep water. I should overcome this. So the learning about how the free, because that wasn't, so the original intention of doing free diving wasn't stress management. It was facing fear. And you discovered this incredibly valuable tool, which is not so much the free diving, but the breath as a stress management tool. At what point did you discover that? Because you know, you've had, can you, would you, are you willing to share some of the trauma that you had from when you were young that you'd been carrying?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I did my military conscript period for 1 year, and I was set out to be a pilot. But just 1 or 2 weeks before the tests, I was in a car accident where I almost died, and I lost my best friend. So I ended up in the hospital. I basically, my body died, but they revived me. So I had terrible trauma of breaking basically my all of my bones, uh, internal bleedings, and also my lungs collapsed. And I was like going from death to survival for months. So recovering from that, my mission was basically to be able to wear a uniform again, because I wanted to be part of something that was, you know, higher than myself, to set up a goal, because I couldn't save my best friend who died in the car accident. In my head, I had to save the world because I couldn't save her. So I chose to become a soldier, and that's how I started my 20 years of service. So basically that led up to, you know, trauma from physical trauma, my whole body was broken, but also the emotional trauma from losing my best friend. So it was a lot of, you know, starching of the whole nervous system that I never got really to deal with, because I didn't know how to do it. Like, the hospital is one thing to heal a leg, but it doesn't heal your nervous system.
And so when you started learning about breath and as you call it, deloading, tell me sort of what happened to you. What kind of person were you? What person are you now as a result of this?
I didn't know it back then, but already in the military, I'm sure you do it in policing too. You basically use your breath to stabilize your gun. In the military, we take a full inhale and then a passive exhale to stabilize. So we don't breathe while we're shooting, basically. And what that basically does is similar to what we do in freediving, because then you stabilize yourself in order to do something that is also stressful but needs to be precise. And then in Afghanistan, when I was serving, I learned from working with the special forces something called box breathing, basically a way of breathing to stabilize yourself and your gun, but also, once again, to deload the stress before you do something that's extremely stressful.
And box breathing works how?
Box breathing is breathing like a box, basically. So you inhale for 5 seconds, you hold for 5 seconds, exhale for 5 seconds, and then you hold for 5 seconds. And you do that a few rounds. And it works within less than a minute. It
So
basically,
so you learn from the special forces that before they, it's not just before they shoot, is it before they knock down a door? Is it something they use to sort of get ready for anything stressful?
I would say it's a way of grounding yourself to become present. Because otherwise, what happens, without going into details, if your brain is already overstimulated by stress and threats, you will make the wrong decisions, and you will basically, don't get me wrong, but shoot the wrong person. Maybe even one of your own, if your stress levels are too high and you can't make the right decision.
One of the things that I've been learning about police, which is when we talk about stress in the profession, most people think, you know, a dangerous situation, a violent person that they have to deal with, you know, sort of out in the field. And of course, that exists. And I think your techniques have value in that world, obviously. But one of the things that I've been learning is that so many of the corporate cultures inside a policing agency are, let's say, could be better. Um, and it's, you know, at the most extreme, there's toxicity where there's verbal abuse and things like that. That's not most of them. I mean, they exist, but unfortunately, it's far too common in the profession where there's just a lack of trust, right? Where I may like the people I work with, I don't necessarily trust the people I work with. And I don't mean like when you call for backup, of course everyone will come. I'm just talking about the day-to-day coming in and out of work. Um, uh, my boss may be fine, don't trust them at all, you know? And what we're learning is that that stress of not feeling trusted or trusting inside inside work, inside the place you go to every day, um, um, it takes a toll. It takes a toll on the person. We also know that alcoholism and suicide are much higher in policing than they are in the national average. And we also know, like in my world, if somebody works in that kind of environment in a regular office, that sense of loneliness or isolation and inability to trust, different, get along with my colleagues, don't trust my colleagues, get along with my boss, don't trust my boss, right? um, we know that it takes a toll on a person. We also know you come home, scream at your spouse, kick the dog, sit on TV, don't want to be bothered, just be despondent. And if you have those conditions that build up, and you give someone authority and a gun, that stress can come out. As your analogy was perfect. When that stress is full, it can come out at the minimum, you're just short-tempered with somebody you're dealing with in the world, and worse, under even greater stress, who knows what can happen. And so the ability to bring that stress down is essential. Um, this is the thing that I've learned. It's this day-to-day drip. How can someone learn to deload that stress if it's day-to-day? What's the practice? Because I
You can
understand it
compare
before
it. Yeah.
something difficult. I get
Mm.
that. You're racing to a
Yeah.
call, you can do your box breath. I get all that. But
Yeah.
what about day-to-day?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think if you look at your nervous system and you talk about the accumulation of stress that you mentioned, it's almost easier for the brain to see someone shooting at you, because then you know exactly that that person is a threat. But if your threat is your evil boss or an annoying colleague or the work environment, that low level stress is basically what causes the most unhealthy stress, because it comes like, the boiling frog syndrome, where you put a frog and then you slowly turn up the heat and then they die basically. Um,
They never
so
jump out is the point, because
yeah, exactly.
they
They
don't
stay
know that
because
they're
it's super
being
nice.
boiled. Right.
Yeah, you can basically go from a jacuzzi to death directly.
Right.
Um, so so if you compare stress to, I mean, your nervous system doesn't differ between physical stress and emotional stress. But if you imagine yourself running a marathon, that's basically, something super stressful. It could be going out in the field and having a close encounter. It could also be like going into a meeting where you have to fire people when you're a leader. So the same stress there, emotional, is the same as running a marathon. And after a marathon, we take a week off. We rest, we recover, we sleep more, we eat more, we breathe, we spend time with our family. But in real life, you go from one incident to the next incident to the next meeting to the next meeting, and in the evening, maybe your spouse breaks up with you. So that accumulation of emotional stress is basically happening on the inside, whereas physical stress is happening on the outside. So if we start treating emotional stress, the everyday stress, almost like physical recovery, because in every sport you have performance, severe amount of stress, but also recovery. So it's a balance.
I think most cops, it's a physically demanding job. And I think most, at least for those who are out in the field of the sworn, you know, it's a physically demanding job. I think most people think that as long as they go to the gym, they're good. As long as they get enough sleep, they're good. Is that true?
It's a good start. Like the sleeping is the best recovery you can get for sure. And also going to the gym, but also in the gym, meeting your friends, maybe talking about what happened, fueling up with nutritious food and not, bad food. And then when it comes to the breath work or the breathing, it's basically the micro regulation. So let's see sleep and the working out as macro pieces to your puzzle. And then the breath work is supposed to be the micro regulation that you do, a little bit of here and there. You can never compensate with the micro pieces to the sleep. If you're sleeping bad, no breath work in the world can save you. So just taking time to basically breathe between your calls or your meetings, to do a slightly longer exhale, sitting down for 2 to 3 minutes, and just breathing properly, if you've had good sleep and if you have fueled up and if you've been to the gym, then you're all set. That's basically the regulation that you can deal with on a 24 basis. But if you never do that, if you're sleeping badly, you don't go to the gym, you don't have time to spend time with your friends and family, and you don't breathe properly, then you're meant to
I guess
crash,
my
and you will
question
crash.
is, if you are going to the gym and you are getting enough sleep, do you still need the breath work? Like, what does the breath work do if you're doing the other stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's a micro regulation, but between the emotion that you get, that might be fear, to the response that you have, because that's basically what defines you. So if you look at fear, it's a completely rational emotion to have, and you should never numb it. Like if you're feeling fear in your workplace or somewhere in an environment, then that fear is real. But instead of asking what fear wants from you, that will always be survival. But if you instead ask, what do I want from fear? And that would be information. So if you're in an environment, let's say that you're out on a call, and you feel that hunch of fear that makes you freeze, then if you ask, what do I need from fear right here and now? Then it could be a breath. It could be calling for support. It could be saying, I can't handle this environment.
Yeah.
We have to go back and figure something out instead.
How can police leaders create a culture um, that encourages staff to help each other with stress? Because I think one of the challenges is it's one thing to know it for yourself, but I'm not sure that many know how to help each other than saying, you're fine, you'll be okay, buck up. You know, I hear stories. I just heard a story the other day of somebody who had to take an 8-year-old kid who just died in a fire and take their body
Mm.
to the hospital, to the morgue.
Mm.
And I mean, they're dealing with this dead child that they've just had to, you know, deal with. And then the chief came in and was like, hey, I got another call for you, you know?
Yeah.
So like how do police leaders, or how do how do all the cops learn to take care of each other? Like how do we create that environment that encourages helping each other manage stress?
Yeah. It's a really good point, and I think listening inwards instead of numbing yourself with another call or with alcohol or going to the gym, sitting in a not dark but silent room with yourself and all of the emotions that are coming instead of suppressing them, because that will create depression. So allowing yourself to use be, where breath could help you just to feel everything, because once again, all of the emotions that you're feeling, they are real and they should be felt because you are indeed human.
That's for the individual. I'm
Yeah.
talking about for the leaders and the colleagues, where my stress load today might be fine. I might be, you know, I'm in leadership. I'm not out in the field as much. How do I create the environment that helps my people or my colleague deal with stress?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say allowing and also maybe enforcing the recovery to actually take place after someone has been out on something, especially as a leader, making sure that they don't only get their cup of coffee and go to the gym, but that they actually get to sit down and be with themselves, maybe with a friend to deload.
That's interesting. The enforcement of breathing I find fascinating. Like, so let's go back to that scenario of, you know, you just found this,
Mm.
you know, you've just come to the hospital, this 8-year-old, and the chief says, or the sergeant says, instead of, I need you to get back out there, like, I need you to go sit down over there. I need you to box breathe for 2.5 minutes because unfortunately I need to send you back out again. Is that what you're talking about?
Could be one case. I mean, it's a quite extreme case when you see a dead child, and I think that's traumatic in itself. But what I would say is that the box breathing would help you to create a rational decision to say either yes or no, I can go out.
Oh, I see, I see, I see. I understand. So instead of suppressing the feelings, going, I got to be tough, I got to show I'm tough, to allow yourself that box breathing that says, don't, I need the afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the breathing in itself is not the solution. It's the path to your solution. That's more rational, where your prefrontal cortex is more activated.
Have you had experiences in your career, maybe in the army or post army even, where you had a leader who didn't get it, where you're learning all these techniques, but they're like, yeah, 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 I need you to do this. You know, how were you able to talk to that leader to try and get through to them so that you can get them to help you with your stress management?
I mean, that's basically why I quit the army, because it didn't work at all. I mean,
Right,
that's why I'm sitting here, so I can like help people from the outside with like, this is my profession now, and it's
right.
more credible. So I think if you're in your own organization, you have to be bluntly honest about like, I'm capable of doing this, but I'm telling you now, I need to recover for this amount of hours, or maybe a day, depending on what happened.
Yeah.
And that's not being vulnerable or weak. It's actually being super strong and saying, hey, this is my boundary, this is who I am. If you put me out there now, I won't be able to do my work in the way that we attempt to do it.
What's really interesting about that answer is it's about accountability, right? Which is
Yes.
which is when you know that you're not capable of bringing what you need to bring to the job, and your boss says, "I need you out there." By you saying yes, when you know the answer is this is a bad idea, the accountability is all on you. That if something does happen, it is on you. When you say, "I will go if you tell me to go," I need you to know, based on what happened this morning, I am I need some time for recovery. And just so you know, there's heightened risk for me and potentially for the people we're supposed to serve. You make the call, but I need you to know that there's some heightened risk here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a quite simple but blunt question you can ask yourself
Yeah,
there. And it's basically, in psychology, it's called the villain and the hero. The
yeah,
villain, we could say, is a criminal in this case, and the hero, I would say, is a police.
yeah.
And both the police and a villain, they have for sure suffered pain and have felt fear. The main difference between a villain and a hero is that the villain says, the world has hurt me, I feel pain, I am afraid, now I'm going to hurt it back. Whereas a hero or a police will say, the world has hurt me, I feel a lot of pain and stress, I won't let that happen to anyone else. And if you can't put yourself in that state, that you can't protect the world from that stress and pain, then you're more likely to become the villain.
Oh, basically, you've just given me an insight that I actually have not thought about in the past, which is, we believe that the purpose of police, the reason we need police on the street, is to protect the vulnerable from harm. And if you're sometimes if you're chasing a bad guy and you're protecting the public from this person, once that person is in handcuffs, now they're the vulnerable one, which is why we put their hand on their head when we put them in the car. We don't want them to get hurt. They're in handcuffs. One thing that I've never really thought about until this moment, which is protect the vulnerable from harm. Sometimes you're that person. I'm the vulnerable
Yes.
one. And
Yes.
how do I protect myself, who is vulnerable, from further harm?
Exactly.
And we have a
Someone might
responsibility.
have hurt you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is amazing. Here's a question that came in that I want to ask you, which is to distinguish between solitude and loneliness.
Mm,
Says you talk about the deep ocean as solitude, not loneliness. Leadership and policing can feel isolating. How
mm.
can leaders reframe solitude as a place of clarity rather than a place of isolation?
That's a beautiful question. I love it. I think there's something beautiful about being alone with yourself and allowing yourself to properly feel. Um, and when we talk about being alone or lonely, that's something that you don't choose. That's basically being hibernated or isolated from your crew or your team or your family or even your work. When it comes to solitude, that's something you choose. That's where you recover, that's where you reflect. You might even be in solitude, in the same room as others, but you choose to be with yourself, almost, choosing actively to become an introvert. So I think loneliness is something that it's not chosen. It's something that it's almost like a disease, right? You think that you're lonely in your decisions, in your world, but solitude is something where you go to recover and basically fuel up your battery.
That's good. I want to share an experience, and then I've got some questions coming in. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat or raise your hand, and we will get to them. So there's some questions coming in. I wanted to share a personal story that was hugely beneficial that came as a result of talking to Lee. I had Lee on my podcast over a year ago, and in that conversation, Lee was telling me that one of the things that everybody gets wrong about breathing is it's not the inhale, it's the exhale. You can't get more oxygen into your body. It doesn't exist. You're either fully oxygenated or you're not, right? You can't get more oxygen in. But what you can do is get carbon dioxide out. And the trick to managing stress is not the deep breath in, but it's the long breath out. And if you think about it, when we're stressed, we always say to each other, take a deep breath, like that'll help. And so Lee was telling me it's the exhale that matters. So literally a week later, I came back into the office. Sheer coincidence, I walked through the door, and my assistant is on speakerphone with her son, who for the first time in his life is having a panic attack. And I hear my assistant saying, take a deep breath, calm down, take a deep breath, calm down. And I remembered Lee's advice. I literally grab the phone. I say, hey, bud, I need you to do something for me. Take any breath in. Don't worry if it's deep or not. Take any breath in. And then what I want you to do is take the longest breath out you can. Do that for me. He did. I said, do it again. Take any breath in. Don't worry about the inhale and take the longest breath out you can. He did. Within seconds, he was fine. It was absolutely unbelievable to witness. And had I not been taught by you, Lee, in that moment, the week before, I would have given the wrong advice also. Genius. Genius. There's some questions coming in here. I'm going to read them. Fear often disguises itself as excuses. I'm too busy. It won't work. It's not the right time. The boss won't let me. It's the system. You've spoken about hearing those same excuses in your head underwater. How do you push through them? And what advice would you give to leaders who face the same mental roadblocks? Good question.
Beautiful question.
Yeah.
Really good question. I think I mentioned it briefly before, but I think the most common mistake we do when it comes to fear is that we ask what fear wants from us, and it will always be, if not survival, but to stay in homeostasis, the balance where everything is warm and cozy and quite nice, and that's not really where we thrive. But the thing is, your brain is a survival and not a thriving machine. So when you start asking instead, what do I want from fear? You will get beautiful pieces of information. So for example, when I go diving, or if I do something that's perceived as extreme with risks, I visualize myself there and I look at what kind of person do I need to be? Because there will always be a certain amount of fear, but how can I overcome the 1,000 pieces of fear? So maybe there's just like 1 or 5 more rational ones left. And those pieces of information is basically how you can build yourself, your skill set, and face difficulties and turn that into opportunities of making you become that person that you need to be when you're there specifically. And you can do that in microdoses. Once again, if you're out in the field and you feel a freeze, like something in your subconsciously is saying you should not be here. Your brain is telling you, your amygdala is firing, you might die here. If you then ask, what is it, where is that coming from? Then it might be the thing, once again, you might need to call for support because your brain is analyzing and saying, this is overwhelming. Or it might be a simple fact saying, you haven't slept for a week, you're a wreck, you will become the villain instead of the hero if you actually execute this.
But what about, and super valuable, but I want to go back to that low level stress, because you said it beautifully, which is the stress out in the field is very often easier to see because it's right there, it's visual.
Yeah.
Adrenaline is pumping. But when you can't always see the stress that's building, you can't always see the villain, but it's building up in you. How do you have that same response? How do you, like, when I start to fear getting fired, fear getting in trouble, fear being humiliated at work amongst my peers, when I start to notice that I'm making decisions because I fear getting in trouble more than I have to do the right thing, right?
Mm.
I fear losing my job. I fear not being able to provide for my family. How address that one for me.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
talk
I
about
think,
fear in the field, not that
yeah,
discount it, but it's the more common conversation. This is the less common conversation.
yeah. I think like 99% of our thoughts aren't real. They're not true. So if you look at it from that perspective, that your brain is actually helping you to survive and living a good life from its perspective of what a good life is. If you actually look at what you need to make rational decisions and not only survive but also thrive, it boils down to, you might not be burnt out or overstressed, but you're more likely to be under-rested. So if you start recovering more and also continue moving, and once again, fueling up with nutritious food, those three elements is like a holy trinity. So if you go back to that basic and then start looking at your problems and your fears again, you will have a much better perspective of what the next like rational step is.
So what you're saying is go back to that cup analogy, which is if you're not managing what's in there and you don't have a practice of deloading, that fear is more likely to show up. What you're saying is if you do this practice, then the fear that would have shown up actually doesn't show up as fear now. It shows up as a challenge, a thought, something I need to deal with, but it's not fear, is what you're saying. Is that right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
no,
because you're
different.
probably in the
It's no different than
sorry.
working out, right? And all of a sudden you can lift a heavy suitcase and you don't even think about it.
No, and that's the thing. Like as soon as you have a performance, and when you reach a certain level, the stress that you have accumulated, you need to deload it. Otherwise, your muscles will break, your brain will break, your heart will break, and your whole nervous system will break.
Yeah. Here's a question that came in as well. Your journey bridges military service, elite sport, and leadership. What are some of the common threads that you have discovered about human performance and trust in extreme environments that leaders in policing need to hear?
That's a really good question. Great questions, guys. I think when it comes to the baseline for me will always be the trinity that I just mentioned. Like no matter what you set yourself out to do, whatever your purpose is, just make sure that you are fully fit. And we can talk about physical fitness, but you also have mental fitness and emotional fitness. And those three parts falls back to, are you recovered, are you nourished, and are you moving and training? How's your body composition in order to face whatever mental or emotional goal that you have in front of you? So I think that links very well to a soldier is also an athlete, a leader is also an athlete, and in some way also a soldier that has a mission, right? So the baseline is quite fundamental, and if you have that baseline, you're pretty much set for any mission that you want, and then you add the skill set that you need for that specific environment or goal or wherever you want to go, basically.
What's the difference between mental fitness and emotional fitness? You mentioned both
Uh,
as part of that work.
yeah, I would say the mental fitness is a lot about mindset training. For example, ask yourself what you want from fear instead of what fear wants from you. That's a mindset thing, or like a tool or a mantra that I have. The emotional fitness is basically looking at, if am I listening to my heart? That's more about your purpose to doing this. Is it just an ego thing? I want that medal, I want this external pleasure, I want to be on that pedestal, I want to be perceived as a hero. That's the ego. But if you listen to your heart, is it really worth it? Is it worth the sacrifice of being away from my family, from my friends, or going on another mission? And if the answer there is no, I miss my family, I want to be home, it's not worth the sacrifice, then the ego or the mind has to listen to that.
Here's another question that's come in. Once you identify the fear, how do you have a different thought process for a better outcome when faced with fear? And again, I want to address the fear of the physical and the slow drip of stress that can sometimes reveal itself as fear. So
Yeah.
again, once you identify the fear, how do you have a different thought process for a better outcome when faced with fear?
Yeah. I think you have to see not the fun of it, but the excitement in it, because every fear is a challenge, and it can be a massive challenge. Like my world record under the ice in Greenland, it wasn't meant to be a world record. It just happened to be because no one was stupid enough to do it before. But that took me 1 year to train for, and I was still terrified or afraid when I was there, right? So, but my purpose of doing it was basically to overcome the biggest fear of my life, and I turned it into something, exciting, and we also documented it so I could share it. So in my mind, being able to share how I overcame my fear to help other people was my goal that overreached the service that I wanted to share over, like, reached all of my biggest macro fears.
Did I ever
And then
tell
when
you
it
that?
comes to the
Sorry, go on.
sorry, no, I was going to talk about micro fears versus the macro fear.
Oh, please, please, please.
Yeah, like if you look at it in everyday life, usually fear just sneaks up on you, like as you said, a challenge or an excuse. And what I found, which is super interesting, there's a small part of your brain called the AMCC. I won't try to pronounce it in Swedish English, but it actually grows when you do something that makes you uncomfortable. So every time that you take uh, take that step, or go into a cold plunge, or you take that hard decision, or you study something new that you really don't want to do, that you're procrastinating about, your brain, a part of your brain linked to willpower, actually grows and becomes bigger. So it doesn't make life easier, it just makes you more prone to actually have more willpower in life in general.
Question that just came in. When is fear healthy versus unhealthy?
Brilliant question. I would say that if you are overfilled in your coffee cup, stress cup, sorry, then fear is not good. Because then it's called hormetic stress, stress when it's growing. So basically what you need to do then is to basically empty the stress or deload the stress and heal. Maybe like for me after the car accident, I really wanted to go on a mission with the military because that was my, bigger purpose, but I was also in a wheelchair. So my part of the healing was basically uh, getting a full body to heal up properly, and
Mm.
also healing somewhat emotionally. And then I could pursue my mission to help others. Otherwise, I would have been a wreck, and I would have been like, a load for my team and also for the place where I was in.
I'm relating a lot of what you're saying to my own life as well. When you talk about, and I love the question about when is fear healthy or unhealthy. And, I think the default is fear is always unhealthy, and that's just not true.
Mm,
And I think you're right. Like when something goes horribly wrong at work, for me, the stakes aren't life is death, but the fear is I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to make the wrong decision. I'm going to blow up the business. I'm going to lose a ton of money. I'm going to disappoint people, whatever it is, right? I know that if my stress load is high and I haven't done the work of deloading, that when something happens unexpectedly, I don't have the capacity to manage yet another thing. As you said, your analogy is so perfect, and overflow is what happens. At best, uh, I'll make a decision, but I'll be very aggressive towards people. Not good. And at
yeah.
worst, I'll make a very bad decision or shut down. I'll just become despondent. That's, unfortunately, I know how I am when the cup overflow, the stress cup overflows. Like I just check out, you know? Some people double down and some people disappear. I disappear. But I also know that when I've done the work of deloading stress and something unexpected happens, my mindset is very different. My mindset is embracing the uncertainty as opportunity. I'm like, oh, okay, this happened. This may not be fun, but let's see what we can do with this thing here. And it's a remarkable thing to see the difference with the same thing when I don't want to say prepared for it because one's never prepared for uncertainty, but my stress load is able to perceive fear as something exciting even. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. Did I ever tell you about when I was watching the Olympics and I was listening to the journalists interview the athletes? Did I ever tell you this? So I was watching
I
the
don't think so. Yeah.
I was watching the Olympics, and I noticed that all of the journalists asked all of the athletes the same question, right? Which is, are you nervous or were you nervous? And all of the athletes gave the same answer. No, I'm excited. Or no, I was excited. And when I started to realize it, I realized that when you think about what the characteristics of nervousness are, right? Your heart starts pounding, your hands get clammy, you start envisioning the future. Then I was thinking about like, well, what are the characteristics of excitement? Your heart starts pounding, your hands get clammy, you start envisioning the future. And these elite athletes had learned to interpret this data that their body was given them, not as nervousness, but as excitement, which is why they're able to perform under extreme pressure. The reason the journalists were saying, "Are you nervous?" is because they would have been nervous. And so I saw this, and I did an experiment on myself. I was on a flight, and it was not good, like not good, and like my instinct was to go like this, and I literally said out loud to myself, "This is exciting," and I relaxed. It was astonishing. And I've used it many, many times. Like if I'm presenting in front of like a crazy audience or something, you know, high-powered people, and it's like I'm nervous that I'm going to screw up. I'm nervous that I'm going to humiliate myself. I'm nervous that they won't like me or say the wrong thing. And I literally said to myself, this is exciting. I can't believe that I'm in front of these people regardless of this is so exciting. And literally, the characteristics are still there. My heart's still pounding, my head's still clammy, but I'm looking forward to it and much better able to manage whatever things I have. And I play to win rather than play not to lose.
I would call that a mental fitness tool.
There we go.
Yeah.
There's some more questions coming in. I want to ask you. How do you talk to a leader if they don't get it? We said that one. We've done that one. Oh, here's one. At the Curve Conference keynote, which thank you very much for joining us there. You described swimming with whales as a deep sense of connection, even without words. Policing is about connection, often across barriers of fear, mistrust, and silence. What have you learned about nonverbal presence and calm that could help leaders connect with those they serve? Difficult question.
Also a beautiful question. I think it goes back to being human and even showing appreciation to people or things or animals that are completely different from you. And because there's very few times in life where you actually are in front of real danger, but our brain is trained to overfire when it comes, you know, threats and fears. Like there's always a lion behind the bush. So even if you go, as I do, I go freediving with sperm whales, who are the biggest predator on this planet. It's basically an aquatic T-Rex, and it could kill me not just by biting me, but just by sending out its super powerful sonar and vaporize me, basically. But they don't. They they don't. So I think being for me, I was terrified of them. Like that was also one of my fears that I wanted to face before Greenland. I thought that maybe there would come a whale under the ice and eat me. Completely irrational, but that's where fear goes. So I befriended the whales, and I discovered that the presence of just being fully there will help your amygdala to rest and your whole nervous system to be completely focused and in nature. And nature has that amazing magical healing power of us. So I think the awareness of being, if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, just go and sit under a tree and breathe. It literally works. And also in Greenland, where it was so vast and there was like polar bears running around, it was so beautiful and feeling that crispy air. So if you learn to appreciate and be grateful for the smallest things that actually is around you, if you look at what you actually have, we tend to always look at the variation, like I'm not warm, I'm hungry, there's might be some lion out there. But if you instead see the totality of what you already have, then you will be more grateful and it will actually calm you down.
A lot of the things we've been talking about, how a person deals with stress, how we hold space for a person to deal with, somebody else to deal with stress. What is the role of the community? What is the role of the cop to the left of me, the cop to the right of me, the dispatcher to the left of me, the dispatcher to the right of me? What is the role of my tribe in all of this? Because freediving is a very solitary experience inherently. But what is the role of other people in all of this, and how do we learn to benefit from the people with whom we work? And
If I can be blunt, I would say shut up and listen. Like listen to your friends, listen to your colleagues. Don't provide solutions or answers. Just hold the space for them to be angry, to cry, to scream, or be silent. And you said it yourself, sit with them in the mud. And it's really frustrating not to be able to offer like a direct help. Like you basically want to give them the oxygen vent, right? But you can't tell anyone else how to solve their life. You can just show up, sit with them, and allow them to feel all of the feels without shaming or judging them.
Just to double click on that, because I think it's so important. When friends come to us in stress, our instinct, well-founded, well-intentioned, are to fix or to rationalize, right? What are you talking about? That's fine, right? And the reality is, you're right. We have to just allow people to and affirm the feelings. If I were you, I'd feel the same way. Or my goodness, this is stressful. Think about when your kid loses their teddy bear, right? You don't say, it's fine, I'll just buy you another one. You go, sweetheart, of course it's awful. Oh my goodness, you know? Yes, it's terrible. If we affirm, we don't just talk them out of their feelings.
Yeah, and also expressing anger. Like there's so much research now showing that kind people are more prone to get really bad diseases because it affects the kindness kind of affects and breaks down their immune system. So actually showing anger and having a sufficient immune system from expressing anger, expressing all the feels
Oh, all right,
instead of suppressing and breaking down. Yeah.
let's be clear here. It's not about kind, it's about pretending everything's fine.
Yes. Yes.
It's not about being kind.
Nice, not
Kind is
kind. Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Kind is
too
oxytocin.
too nice. Yeah.
Very, very healthy.
Boundaryless more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice versus kind. It's
Yes.
that people, when they're nice,
Exactly.
when they suppress their feelings, when they have to smile all the time, when they have no healthy outlet for their emotions like anger, fear, stress, anxiety, whatever it is, that there's no healthy outlet, you're more likely to have disease and die unhealthy because of the cortisol that's coursing through our bodies.
Yes.
Yes, 100%. This is good.
Kind is
Kindness is
good.
good. Lee, you know, uh, every time I talk to you, I learn something. I learned something here today. The big one is
Thank
protect the
you.
vulnerable from harm. That sometimes we're the vulnerable ones, and what we need to do to protect ourselves from the harm that can come to us from our own mind, our own stress. And until we can protect ourselves and deload that stress and learn those techniques and rely on each other, we will hurt ourselves more, and worse, we could potentially hurt others, even if it's just our colleagues, the way we treat them. Leaders who are overstressed will mistreat their team if they don't learn to deload their own stress. And protecting the vulnerable from harm it starts at home, doesn't it? I'll give you the last word. Thank you so much for serving this magical community that is the Curve. These are the most forward-thinking people who put on that uniform, who say, I want to be better, I want to grow, I want to take myself and I want to take our profession on. I'll give you the last word, and thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you, guys. Wonderful questions. I'm very honored to be here. And for the rest of the afternoon and evening, try inhaling 3-4 seconds with your nose and exhaling 5 to 6 seconds. Just a few rounds, and you will feel the whole energy in yourself just change.
I think the other important thing that I'm learning here is when the words meditation or box breathing or all of these things are thrown about, it sounds so hippy dippy, ooey gooey, right? And I think what's important about this is you are a warrior, you are a soldier, you are a combat veteran. You learned some of these techniques from working with the special forces, and you saw them doing it. You're an elite athlete who puts yourself willingly in extreme danger, which is much like policing, where they are willingly sometimes putting themselves in extreme danger, as you are doing. And these techniques are not only the furthest thing from mushy, they are absolutely essential for survival and the ability to thrive in stressful environments.
Self-leadership. Yes, definitely.
Self-leadership. Lee, as always, you're an absolute inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.